is going on, Only Playbook fans? We're back. Finally, a month and a half hiatus. Fantasy championships ended, so we gave ourselves a little bit of a break, and we are back. We are discussing the NFL draft. It's right around the corner. We've watched a lot of film on these prospects, and today we are going to talk about our top 5 quarterbacks heading into the 2026 NFL draft. Jake is joining me today. Jake, it's been a minute. How are you feeling, man?
Good, feeling good. Yeah, I'm excited for the NFL draft. We haven't really recorded anything since the playoffs, so was happy with the Panthers' performance. Obviously, a heartbreaker against the Rams, where we gave it everything we had. But it gets me really excited for next year. Getting to see the team produce it the way they have been. I think we have a really good opportunity to get back in the playoffs. So really good into the year, I think.
Yeah, you have to be happy about the Panthers' performance. They nearly upset the Rams in the playoffs, so played a lot better than you would have probably expected them to. And like you said, the future is bright. So Bryce Young looking a little bit better. You have T-Mac taking the next step, and a lot of other young pieces. So definitely bright future ahead. Fantasy championships have officially ended. If you guys were listening to our last episode, I was in the championship against Shashot, who is a 2-time defending champ. And lo and behold, he won again. So 3-time champion Shashot. Congratulations to you, man. I am the first loser. So it doesn't feel great, but my consolation prize is in our league of record. I did end up winning the championship. So pretty happy about that. And then in our dynasty league, congratulations to Ben, I believe, right? Did Ben win? Yeah. Congratulations to Ben, who celebrated a double win, winning the championship in our dynasty, and his Seattle Seahawks did win the Super Bowl officially as of 3 days ago. So congratulations to him. He may still be drunk, and it's Wednesday. So as he should be naturally. So a lot of things going on, but we want to turn the page. We want to move into 2026. The NFL draft is a really exciting time, Jake. I love doing film on prospects and grading them out and talking about what I think about them. It's probably my favorite time of the year, not named basically being in the thick of fantasy football, but I'm really excited to talk about it. I know you are very, very well versed in college football. You watch it all year round. I try to catch it, glimpse here, glimpse there, but I know NFL is basically what I focus on mainly. So a lot of my prospect watching is typically after the season. So I spent a lot of time the last couple of weeks diving into these quarterbacks, and I'm excited to talk about them, man. So I will let you take the floor first and talk me through kind of how you determined your list, your honorable mentions, and then I'll give you mine and we'll dissect some of these players.
Yeah, perfect. So as far as quarterbacks, obviously a little bit of a thinner class than I think what we're used to, especially at the top of the board. I think there are some players here that could be sneaky contributors, just depending on situation, depending if they really get the opportunity. But there are really 7, I think, that stand out for me that I have my top 5. There are 2 I want to mention beforehand that I think are worthy of at least mentioning. One of those being Cade Klubnik from Clemson. The other one is Taylen Green from Arkansas. So both of those, I think, are definitely my honorable mentions, guys that I want to keep an eye on, see where they end up landing. Then going into my top 5, I think number 1's pretty obvious, where everybody, any ranking you're going to see, you're going to have Fernando Mendoza at the top. Number 2 and 3, I actually went back and forth a little bit. And this is kind of where there's a small caveat. You may have a different list. We did not look at them beforehand. So, I am not sure that one of these players is going to be in the draft. He's actually fighting the NCAA currently to try to get another year at Ole Miss. So Trinidad Chambliss, I think him and Simpson, I have them as the 2 and 3 right now. I go back and forth on them, so we can talk a little bit more after you share your list on kind of why I have him ranked as high as I do. I think that may be a little bit different than how some people see the board. Number 4, I have Garrett Nussmeier. And number 5, I have Carson Beck. Those are my top 5 quarterbacks here in this class. Still a lot of other guys on the board that I watched and really like, but that's kind of my top 5 and the guys that I feel most optimistic about going into the draft.
All right. So this is why you are on the podcast, Jake. We have a lot of similarities in our list, but there's a little bit of nuance to the differences, and I think we'll touch on that a little bit. But I did not watch a bunch of Taylen Green. I saw a little bit, very athletic, but it felt like he was very raw. So I know we'll talk a little bit more about kind of why you have him in your honorable mentions. But for me, I had a couple of honorable mentions. I had Carson Beck in my honorable mentions, so he did not crack my top 5. And I also did have... I have like this weird love-hate relationship with Luke Altmaier. I watched him for like 3 years in college, and I just feel like he plays the quarterback position so well. It's just he's undersized. He doesn't have like an insanely amazing rocket arm or anything, but I think he does a really good job of understanding defensive coverages, his pre-snap read, and kind of ability to dissect the defense before he's hiking the football. I feel like he has a pretty high IQ, but I know that maybe his physical limitations are going to be the difference in him, potentially getting drafted, becoming an undrafted free agent, or even getting an opportunity to, be a backup in the NFL. I don't know that he has tremendous like starting upside, but I do think because of his high IQ, he has the ability to potentially be a serviceable backup down the line. So he was actually one of my honorable mentions, but my top 5, similar to yours, Fernando Mendoza, unquestionably the number 1 quarterback prospect in this draft class. He should probably go 1 to the Raiders. I also have Trinidad Chambliss as my number 2 quarterback, but like you said, he's fighting for an extra year of eligibility, so there's no guarantee that he's even going to be in the draft. And sadly enough, if he's not in the draft, then this quarterback class gets even thinner than how it already is right now, and I don't feel great about anybody behind Trinidad Chambliss, to be honest. So I have Ty Simpson also at number 3. You had Carson Beck, and then you had Cade Klubnik as your honorable mention. I had Carson Beck as my honorable mention, and I have Cade Klubnik as my quarterback 4, and then I have Garrett Nussmeier as my QB 5. So we have some similarities for sure, but first and foremost, you had Taylen Green as an honorable mention. So I guess talk to me a little bit about what you saw with him.
Yeah, I think you pretty much nailed it. Very, very raw prospect. He's one of those guys that I think maybe a late round draft pick, somebody you pick up. But there is a lot of potential there. He has a little bit of a cannon. He's a freak athlete. He has prototypical size, massive hands. He's 6'6", can run the ball incredibly well. It kind of has a little bit of, and I don't think they're very comparable just because Jalen Milroe actually played a lot of snaps at Alabama, showed a lot, but kind of similar type of vibe there, where he has that really good size. He's pretty quick for a quarterback. So I just think there could be a lot of potential there. Like you said, it's raw. It's a developmental project. It's probably somebody that you do draft and it doesn't work out. But I think on a late round pick, if you're willing to just take a stab at it, kind of reminds me of like a Jalen Milroe style build. And he could be good for some packages, right? Where you have him in some certain situations like Milroe gets used. Panthers did it with Cam Newton when we brought him back, where you kind of had him in that, comes onto the field to run QB keepers, things like that. So I think there would be some value there. And I think I just kind of like the upside. I feel like there could be a really strong upside there with him playing as little as he did. We really don't know for sure if he can be a great prospect until he gets in the right system and we can test it out.
Yeah, I think you're spot on in the sense that the NFL loves project quarterbacks, especially when they have they're physical freaks and they have like the prototypical size to be an NFL quarterback. A lot of teams and coaches think that they can, hone in on some of the nuances and mechanics that make these quarterbacks as raw as they are. So you'll always see teams, franchises at least take a stab at these quarterbacks late in the NFL draft and try to develop them. So I think he is the perfect candidate for that. I'd
like to hear a little bit more about, so we had Carson Beck and Cade essentially flipped. So I'm curious your thoughts just on what you like about Cade, what kind of had you leaving Carson Beck on the outside, and I can give you kind of my thoughts on those two as well.
So my thing, if I'm just comparing them to each other, obviously Carson Beck has a little bit more of the size. I think he's 6'4". Cade's a little undersized. He's 6'2". I think Beck comes in at like 220. Cade's 205. So Cade's already undersized. But I honestly think that Carson Beck's arm strength comes into question a lot of times when he's playing versus Cade's. I know Carson Beck had a UCL surgery or something like that. And I don't know that after the UCL surgery, his arm strength's even there. And I guess I don't know if it's taking a lot longer for that to come back. And there's a chance that once he gets drafted, he's slowly going to work through that play strength and be able to throw the football with a little bit more zip. But that's the biggest thing I saw with him in Miami this past year is I just didn't see a ton of arm strength with him that it really worries me that when the windows are tighter, the defenses are faster, is he going to be able to really zip the ball into these tight windows? So that's my biggest fear with him. And the problem is he's not mobile either. So he's a little bit immobile. His arm strength a little bit questionable, and he struggles under pressure. And so I think when you add those three things together, I'm always like, big red flag, right? You can't move. Yeah. Your arm strength's a little bit questionable. And when you are under pressure, you're not smart enough to get rid of the football quickly and you struggle. And so his mechanics get all out of whack. For a guy that's been in college for a little while, I would have expected under pressure him to, somewhat be poised because he has to be a pocket passer like that. That is how he's going to succeed if he does succeed in the NFL. So that's where my fear lies with Beck. Where it's slightly different for me with Cade is that Cade has great touch when he throws the football. I think he has amazing touch touch on the football. That doesn't mean he's the most accurate, but I just think he plays with a really good touch. I don't think his arm strength is a problem. For his size, I think he can get the football basically everywhere you need to. Now, is he going to zip the football, over the middle in really, really tight coverages? He may struggle at that. But again, we're comparing a couple of prospects that, in our opinions are probably still developmental guys, despite, the prolific college programs that they played in. So I think that's the problem with them. And I also think Cade's a better athlete than Carson Beck. So even if he's going to be able to get out of the pocket, so he's undersized. And I think with a better athlete, decent arm, a good touch, I also think he has good IQ. Now, here's the problem with Cade is when you look at like 70% of his plays, you're like, wow, he's very poised. He's doing a lot of good things. He understands defenses. But then when he has bad plays, they are so bad. They are just like, it's like Sam Darnold on the Jets seeing ghosts bad, So how can you get, how can you get those limited and him playing the way he can 70% of the time a little bit better? And I don't know if that's going to come with confidence, just coaches trusting in him trusting what he sees in terms of coverages. So obviously you need to see a little bit more consistency, but I think his tools are a lot more like you can refine his tools a lot better, in my opinion, than potentially Carson Beck. So that's where my biggest difference lies between the two. I guess I want to kind of hear what you think.
Yeah, no, I actually think we're kind of thinking about things in a similar manner. The big reason I had Carson Beck in the rankings and Cade dropping out, one, of course, like you just said there at the end with Cade Klubnik, there's just been a lot of inconsistency of play. When he's good, he's phenomenal, a really, really good player. But we've seen a lot of those type of guys, I think of Johnny Manziel. Of course, he had his own personal issues that defaulted his career. But, you think of these guys that are so hot and cold, franchises get very frustrated with that. Whereas Carson Beck, I think, one thing I do think about Carson Beck is I think we might already be seeing his peak right now. He's been playing college football for now 5-6 years, if you count the red shirt. He's been around for a really long time. I think we really may be seeing about what kind of player he is right now. I don't know that there's a dramatic improvement there. The one thing that was popping into my mind as I was watching him play and kind of what got me to put him in the list is I do think between the two, I would feel more confident with him as a plug and play type of quarterback right now in the NFL. He has pretty good decision making, doesn't handle the pressure all that well, but he can lead a drive. If you put him in the right offense, I thought immediately of like Brock Purdy in San Francisco. You drop him in that system, has a fantastic offensive line. He can just sit behind them and dink and dunk passes. I think he has the intelligence to really play that game manager style role. And so, whether he ever ends up in that situation, I don't know that he'll really get that opportunity. But I think from a backup perspective too, if I'm thinking about bringing in a backup quarterback, I think about J.J. McCarthy getting hurt this year. If I had to choose between these two, I'd probably be like, okay, well, I know Carson Beck could come in and at least facilitate the offense, get my receivers touches. And I just don't know that Cade can he can lose you games and he can win you games. And, in the right system, that can be good. But I think there are other systems that would definitely favor a player like Carson Beck to just plug and play, really good backup that can come in and give you consistency, even if it's not great or even all that good. It's going to be consistent and you know what to expect from him. And he doesn't make a lot of mistakes. He did at Georgia, but he cleaned a lot of that up at Miami. He was a lot better at not turning the football over. And he was one bad pass in a national championship away from leading a game-winning drive to beat Indiana. So he's played in big games. That's where I kind of gave him the slight edge over Cade in that bar, because I just think he's more of a ready to plug into the system now. But if you're looking at upside, I think no brainer, you're going with Cade.
Exactly your last statement, right? I think if you want somebody who's already got a floor, because we talked about it, 6 years in college, essentially, we kind of know what you're going to get from Carson Beck. Do we even think there's another gear to his play, We don't know, right? But like you said, there's at least a floor established with Beck, whereas the highs and lows with Cade, the highs are really high and then the lows are really low. It's just about limiting those lows. And a lot of times with these rankings, when you're ranking prospects, I'm always trying to shoot for upside, because you're always the way the NFL drafts now, right? It's kind of the thought process I have is like, you're drafting a guy like 4 or 5 years ago, Malik Willis was all of a sudden projected to be a first-round pick when we knew that his skill set was incredibly raw. But the NFL will take a stab at a guy like that versus, taking a stab at a guy who's already been 6 years in college. They're okay. they're consistent, they have a floor, but how much better can they really get? So I think the way I evaluate prospects is more so like, can we get more out of this guy in the next at the next level that can elevate him above these other players? And that's where I personally was like, I think Cade has more upside to reach. Carson's got a better floor, but it's going to be more about, like you said, pick your poison and pick your flavor. What franchise are you going to? What are you hoping this guy's going to do? Is he going to come in and automatically be a bona fide backup? Is he going to compete to be a starter? Is he going to sit behind a veteran for 2-3 years? And it's funny you brought up the Shanahan system. I have a player that I wrote could be solid in the Kyle Shanahan offense. And believe it or not, it's actually Luke Altmaier. I felt like that guy can run an offense so well that if you threw him into Kyle Shanahan's office, I would be remiss to believe that he couldn't operate that offense. And so there's definitely truth to what you're saying. And I completely agree with what you're saying. We're just evaluating them a little bit differently, which I completely appreciate. So that's pretty awesome that we saw it the way we did. Now, we both have Garrett Nussmeier behind the top 3 guys, right? So tell me a little bit about what you like about Garrett Nussmeier and what you dislike about him.
Yeah, one of the toughest things for me in evaluating him is, yes, you want to look at 2025, but there's also a part of me that wants to put that out the window because of all the injuries he was dealing with, a lot of the problems there. Obviously, coach got fired midway through the season, a lot of turmoil around the LSU program this year. And with his injuries, I watched a lot of film. I went back actually after watching some of the 2025 tape and rewatched some of the 2024 tape of Garrett Nussmeier. And that's really what gave me a lot of optimism of, he has really good, strong pocket presence. Mm-hmm. He's really accurate when he's sitting in the pocket. I still tend to believe that there's a little bit of potential to be found there. Obviously the injuries are a concern. He was banged up most of the year. That's one of my biggest concerns with him is how bad are the injuries? Is this something that's going to be a prolonged problem, or is he going to be 100% by the time we hit training camps or combine here shortly? He is a little bit smaller. He's only 6'1", so that's kind of another small concern there. But for me, I think this could be an even higher upside play than some of the Cades and some of those folks where, we've actually seen Garrett Nussmeier play very well in the LSU system in 2024. And it's just how much weight you want to put on that 2025 season. I tend to personally just think that the injuries had a big effect on that. But, I could be wrong, but I still feel like there's a lot of potential there.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think I did the same thing where it was really hard to evaluate him 2025 because you could just visibly see some games where you knew he wasn't 100%, and you're just like, I don't really know what to do with that. Because even with that, I think what I took away from 2025 tape is he's injured, he's undersized, but he doesn't take a lot of sacks. He's able to get through his progressions pretty well to where, again, for somebody who's not mobile, who's undersized, who was injured, still was able to deliver the football on time. He gets through his progressions well, and he's kind of a gunslinger. Like, for being so small, the way he plays, the way he slings the ball almost kind of gives me weird shades of Baker Mayfield. Obviously Baker's weight, he's bigger, he's stronger, and he's much more mobile, but the gunslinger mentality that sometimes you see from Nussmeier gives me kind of it reminds me a little bit of Baker. But the problem is, again, he's not very mobile, and his injuries are probably a big factor. And when you have these injuries in college and you're already undersized, you're going to be playing with bigger, stronger, faster players in the NFL. You just worry, how durable can he be at the next level? But that's not to if he was 6'4" or 6'5", Jake, we'd probably be talking about a guy that's potentially going to be drafted in the first round, because teams would salivate over the fact that he goes through his progressions really well. He has the ability to read pre-snap coverages, and he's running a pretty NFL caliber offense at LSU, right? So again, he's got the IQ up here. So I think the problem with him is, again, exactly that. The injuries are going to be a giant concern, but again, injuries aren't something that's 100% translatable. Just because you were always hurt in college doesn't mean you're always going to be hurt in the pros. It's just a risk for a team to draft, but this is a risk that could pay huge dividends for a team that takes a flyer on this guy, and if he ends up staying healthy, because I do think he can grasp an NFL offense well. I do think he's able to, again, dissect and read coverages a lot better than maybe almost any other guy here, maybe not named Mendoza. So I do think that works in his favor. So I think we see Nussmeier the exact same. I think if he didn't have an injury-riddled 2025, we'd be talking about a guy that would probably be pushing Trinidad Chambliss or Ty Simpson for the second or third quarterback on the list.
Yeah, I mean, he was pretty consistently mocked in the first round coming into the year. Pre-injuries, everything. I mean, people felt pretty confident. Even Cade Klubnik, I mean, coming into the year, there were conversations around, could he be the number 1 overall pick?
Yep.
So, definitely a lot has changed in that time. But still thinking back, obviously all that film doesn't go out the window, right?
Mm-hmm.
We saw something in Garrett Nussmeier that said, hey, this could be an elite player. So, I don't think that all goes out the window just because he got banged up.
Yep. I agree. I absolutely agree. Number 3. So we both have Ty Simpson, quarterback out of Alabama. Number 3. He's 6'2", 210. So what I saw with Ty Simpson, while he does have accuracy issues, this guy zips the football. He has a really good arm. And what I really like about him, and I think this is just playing at Alabama, is a lot of quarterbacks struggle coming into the NFL to throw the football across the middle of the field, right? I think everybody loves to throw the football outside because you don't have to look above the defensive lineman, your offensive lineman. It's a lot more congested in the middle of the field. So you're really having to play with anticipation. And I think he did that really, really well. Granted, Alabama, it felt like Alabama didn't have the best team that we've seen over the last 2 decades around him. It was almost like one of the worst teams I've seen for Alabama around him. A lot of drop footballs, with Ryan Williams hype and all that. And he actually ended up playing pretty poorly this year. So there was not a lot of help around Ty Simpson, but I think he's got great feel in the pocket. He's a good enough athlete. And again, I think right now, if you plopped him into an NFL team, would they succeed? I don't know, but I do think he could start immediately in day one. So I think because of that, he could be a back-end first-round quarterback. It's just about, the right system. A place that I kept seeing that made a lot of sense was if he got drafted by the Rams. Stafford's coming back another year. You play behind Matty Stafford, and then, next year, it's the keys to the car are yours, Ty Simpson. So I think something like that makes a lot of sense, but I just appreciate the fact that he loves to throw the football across the middle of the field. And it's so hard to find prospects that can do that consistently, do that with confidence, and not make a ton of mistakes doing it. So that to me was my biggest X factor for Ty Simpson, because I didn't see that a lot, maybe outside of Mendoza, but I didn't see that a lot from any of the other quarterbacks. It just seems like they're oftentimes scared to throw the football across the middle of the field.
Yeah, and that's a huge thing that jumped out to me with Ty Simpson was just the fact that if you looked at Alabama's team this year, and I know you don't watch quite as much college football, but with the Alabama team they had, most teams were putting 4 down linemen to stop the run, and Alabama had one of the worst run games in the entire nation. They could not move the football. Almost never did you see them go over 100 yards rushing in a game. So you came into the game knowing Ty Simpson was going to throw the ball 40 times, and he was still able to dice up defenses, 7, 8 dropping at times, still able to make really strong plays. One of the biggest things that did jump out to me that gives me small hint of worry with Ty Simpson is there are times where he holds on to the ball a little bit long. Mm-hmm. So Shedeur Sanders has a real problem with this, and Ty Simpson would do this quite a bit, where he would try to extend plays rather than throwing the football away. He tries to make something happen. I love the playmaker attitude. But I think that's something that, whatever system he ends up in is something that he's going to have to work on, is being willing to get rid of the football, willing to know when the play is dead. Because there are a lot of times where he would take sacks or get stripped in the backfield because he wants to hold on to the football. He wants to make that big play. He wants to try to really change the game. And Alabama needed that. So it also could be part of the desperation of, hey, we have to pass the ball first, second, and third down every single drive. But, that was one of the big things that stood out to me was just that he did hold on to the football a little longer than I would like. But he has great presence in the pocket. He's really aware of what's going on. He can feel the pressure coming. So I think all the intangible assets you look for in a quarterback, he has. I think it would really depend on the fit, but I think he could definitely be a plug and play type of guy in the right system.
Yeah, and I wouldn't have faulted you, or I don't fault anybody if they have Ty Simpson as QB2 ahead of Trinidad Chambliss, right? Because they're completely different types of quarterbacks. So it's almost like, which one do you prefer, or what's your flavor, or what style do you gravitate towards? And again, like we said, there's a chance Chambliss just goes back to Ole Miss for another year. So with that being said, let's jump into Trinidad Chambliss. We both have him as quarterback too. Jake, what did you like about this guy?
Yeah, I just think the potential, and this is kind of going back to what you were talking about with Cade and Carson Beck. I just think the potential here is astronomically high. Mm-hmm. I think not just the Georgia game, but this is really where it stood out substantially with some of the plays he was making against that Georgia defense, his ability to get outside the pocket, make things happen. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the massive concern here is he spent a lot of years in FCS. Yeah. So he's playing against far inferior competition. He wasn't even the starter for Ole Miss for the entire season. So we have very limited game tape at the FBS level or at this high level. But the counter to that is they dropped him in the SEC. So you're playing against a lot of the best defenses in the country. I think the upside potential is incredible. He's not very tall. He's only, I think, right at 6 foot, or maybe a touch taller than that.
So I think they have him listed as 6 foot, but I went back and like looked at all the other measurements, and I'm almost sure he's probably coming in at like 5'10" at the combine. So he is pretty small.
Yeah. So, that's a little bit of a concern there with just the size. The other piece of it too, I know Jackson Dart's kind of canceled this out a little bit with the way he's performed, but reality is Ole Miss does not run an NFL offense by any stretch of the imagination. And I think actually this offense maybe favored Trinidad a little more than it did Jackson Dart. Jackson Dart could sling the football really well. He had a lot of different attributes and things that he does really well. I think this offense was really built for Trinidad, where it works perfect in everything that he's good at. So there are a little bit of concerns there of how does he translate over? Can he keep up with the NFL speeds? He's not played against that level of competition very long. But I think the upside, I don't want to say he's could be as good as Fernando Mendoza could be. I just don't know. I don't think it's fair to say that with just how good Mendoza's been so far. But I think, in a best case scenario, this is a top 10 level talent if everything works out and he actually clicks in an NFL team.
Yeah, I think so. You brought up a great point. That was my biggest sticking point with him is, again, upside is absolutely tremendous, right? He's by far the best dual threat quarterback prospect in this draft class without a doubt. So he's obviously got that for you. The way he runs around reminds me a lot of Kyler Murray. Now, obviously, Kyler's number 1 overall pick. He has got an insane arm. So he does a lot of things way better than Trinidad does. But I think Ole Miss did a great job of potentially masking what his weaknesses could be. Because like you said, they're not running a full pro style offense. A lot of times what you'd see is they'd get him on a rollout and he'd only be having to read like half the field. And that's always one of my biggest worries when a prospect comes into the NFL, like playing in like a Tennessee type offense where you're just basically looking at one side of the offense, one side of the field, reading the safety and then making the throw that way. Right. And I think a lot of times because they knew that his throwing on the run is by far his probably best skill set outside of maybe just running the football as a quarterback, they utilize that and leverage that a lot. Now, a lot of times in the NFL, those fields and those windows shrink the minute you roll out. In college, yes, you're rolling out and you're running to a sideline or a boundary, and you may have an X receiver or a Y receiver that's substantially better than the defender covering him, so it makes it easier. But in the pros, you're limiting your weapons automatically, and that's one of my biggest pet peeves in the NFL is when you're a quarterback and you need to make a play and all of a sudden the offensive play caller limits the amount of playmakers that are out there for you to even read the coverage through. So I think that's my biggest fear with him is they did that so much with him that if he was to just be in like a pro style offense, had to take like a 5-step drop back, go through his progressions, what would that look like? Or would he be so not used to that it would be like 2 progressions and all of a sudden he's going to start to scramble, right? So that is my biggest fear with him. But because this is not the greatest quarterback class, these are the type of classes where you're going to take a chance or a risk with somebody who has upside potential like Chambliss does, right? We're not talking about guys behind him being like, oh, this guy looks like Manning, this guy looks like Breeze. Or these aren't like top tier level quarterback prospects where you're like, you can't skip or miss out on a surefire, low floor but solid player for this upside guy who may be a bust. A lot of these quarterbacks could be a bust, to be honest. So, right. So that's why I think it makes sense to have Trinidad Chambliss at number 2, because again, you have the top guy who, I don't think potentially is going to be a miss. Obviously, as a number 1 quarterback, the expectations are way too high. So maybe he never plays up to a number 1 quarterback potential, but I don't think he's going to be a miss or a bust in the NFL. But Chambliss and below, every single one of these quarterbacks could be a bust, bro. So that's why I think you're banking on the upside, ranking him too. And I agree with you. I just think the flashy plays, the athleticism, what he brought to the table, being plopped into the SEC after being an FCS quarterback for a long time, that already is like, whoa, what if we let him do that for like 2 more years? Now, here's the problem, Jake. Yeah. He's going to come into the NFL, and when the NFL season starts, the dude's going to be 24 years old. So that to me is already working against him, because it's not like Carson Beck, 6 years in college, and now he can like read a defense. This is like, 24 years old coming into the NFL, but still has so much rawness to his game that I don't know how well he's going to read NFL defenses and play with anticipation and, throw the football before the receivers open. So I think those are all legitimate fears, but the upside is tremendous because the athleticism and the flashy, the high level plays are just so high. So I agree. 5'10", 200 is what I saw him listed at. So that's obviously
that feels about right. Yeah.
Yeah. It like they could list him at 6 foot, but when I watch him play, I'm like, he doesn't look 6 foot. And I forgot to mention this. Nussmeier being only 6'1" is crazy to me, because when I watch him play, I don't look at him and be like, wow, he's only 6'1". Like, he plays a lot bigger than he is. And I don't know why that is, but opposite to that, when I watch Trinidad Chambliss play, I'm like, God, he's small. So that's always a big fear, but the upside potential, given the draft class where he's at, he may not even enter the draft class, and this entire conversation is a moot point at that point. But if he does, I do agree with you that teams are more willing to probably take a risk and draft him over drafting like a Ty Simpson, Cade Klubnik, Carson Beck type player. So that makes sense. That is why we both have Chambliss as our number 2 quarterback, which leads us to the number 1 quarterback. Without a doubt, I have not seen a single ranking or list that has anybody else as the number 1 quarterback, and it is Fernando Mendoza, the quarterback for Indiana, won the championship. Didn't he also win the Heisman, or did I dream that?
Yep, he did. 16-0 season in Indiana. First time it's happened since Yale forever ago.
Yep.
My first thought on Fernando Mendoza is, everyone keeps talking about how, maybe not as high of quality as other number 1 picks. When I watch him, I just don't know why that's the case.
I completely agree. It's like we've lost sight of the fact that the rest of the class sucks. So we're like putting Mendoza in that and being like, oh, it's a weak class. But we need to separate Mendoza and then all these other quarterbacks, because I genuinely think he's going to be a successful NFL quarterback. But continue.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is a very high level NFL prospect, at the most important position. I mean, there are certain games, and very rarely does he play poorly, would be one part of it. He doesn't really make a lot of mistakes, very rarely turns the ball over. It's not like he was on the most elite offense of all time. I mean, he had really good weapons there, but there are other teams. I could pick 10 teams right now that I think have substantially better weapons than what he had in Indiana. But I think that he is just an insanely intelligent quarterback. He puts the ball right where it needs to be, almost never makes mistakes. And when he gets hot, the way he can turn it on in these games. I mean, I think back to the Oregon game in the playoffs, where I think he was like 14 for 17, 180 yards and 4 touchdowns or something crazy like that.
It looked like he couldn't miss for a minute. Yeah, it looked like he could not miss. I rewatched that game and I was like, yeah, 100%.
And so I'm like, when he gets going, I mean, he looks as good as most any prospect I've seen in the last couple of years. I'm not saying he is, as good as Drake May or, as these other prospects, but I think a lot of people kind of have this speculation out there just because this QB class this week that this quarterback, maybe he's not worthy of the 1-1. If I'm at 1-1, I'm taking Fernando Mendoza 100% of the time. I think it's a great value pick to take Mendoza. I worry about the situation, with him going to the Raiders, the offensive line concerns there. But as far as just a pure QB prospect, I think he's actually really good.
I'm so glad you said that, man, because I completely agree. I think, again, like you said, we've lost sight of the fact that the rest of the class sucks, or is just not up to par relative to, prior quarterback classes. What I'm hearing is a lot of people try to compare this class to the class with like Kenny Pickett and Malik Willis and just a bunch of garbage there. And I couldn't disagree more. Like this, taking Mendoza 1-1 is not like taking Kenny Pickett in the first round as the most NFL ready quarterback. No. This guy is a stud, bro. 6'5", 225, already has the size, national championship. He is as tough a quarterback as I've ever seen come out of college. He's exactly what you want your leader or your quarterback in the locker room to be. So all of the intangibles from that aspect, it's top notch. It's like 10 out of 10. Every interview, he's going to absolutely nail. So you're never going to have to worry about anything like that. He's got an above average arm. He's great at ball placement. And I think the best throw that he makes is I've never seen a college quarterback come into the NFL that is already so good at back shoulder throws. Like so many of his throws at Indiana were like perfect timing back shoulder throws. And that only happens with practice and chemistry. But that is quite literally the one throw, college, NFL, that is unguardable when done right? So he's already mastered that one aspect of playing quarterback. And I think I can't even think of other really good quarterbacks in the NFL that do that well outside of Aaron Rodgers. Like he's the first guy that comes to mind as the guy when it comes to back shoulder throws, and Mendoza throws it almost as well as Aaron Rodgers right now. So I think that it shouldn't go unnoticed that all that is just really, really high IQ. Like you're understanding the timing, you're understanding the coverage, exactly where your receiver is going to break. That's the game slowing down in your brain for you. And a lot of quarterbacks coming into the NFL struggle with the speed of the NFL. And right now for Fernando, it's already slowed down at college. He's obviously at Indiana. He's 16-0. So it's not like, he played shitty schools and stuff. He went to the playoffs, beat every good team, won the championship, won the Heisman, right? So he has nothing left to prove in college football. He's done everything. And so good timing, elite back shoulder throw, great ball placement. Now accuracy, sometimes it happens with a lot of quarterbacks. His accuracy may not be 10 out of 10, but the ball placement is top notch. Again, above average arm, and he's sneaky athletic. Like he can scramble and get you those yards. I do think the edges changes in the NFL will be a little faster than, what we expect and how we see him play in college. But that still doesn't mean that I don't think they can't run like a QB keeper up the middle, or he's going to run like a read option outside. I do think he's plenty capable of that. Like you said, my only concern is the situation that he's going into, right? A lot of times these quarterbacks come out as great prospects and the situation kills the player. And so the Raiders, no offensive line. They traded away Jacoby Myers. They have no weapons on the outside. It's just Ashton Genty in the backfield. They have Brock Bowers, obviously. But I think the problem is going to be offensive line. But the saving grace there, in my opinion, could be the fact that they did bring in Clint Kubiak to be their head coach. He is amazing when it comes to play actions. And I do think if they lean into the run game with Genty, if they can just run block for him somewhat decently this year compared to how abysmal it was last year, working the play action off of Genty running the football is going to be Mendoza's bread and butter, and it's going to be what saves him, and it's going to be potentially what continues to give him the confidence he needs to continue to develop and be a better quarterback. So I think he is fantastic, man. Like I don't even really have a great comparison for him, to be honest, in the NFL, because a lot of people throw out the Jared Goff comparisons, and I'm just like, I think he offers way more. I think he offers more moxie. He's got more mobility. He can do a little bit more. Like Goff under pressure is terrible. Mendoza under pressure still keeps his poise. So I'm very, very impressed, man. Like I'm trying my best not to overhype Fernando Mendoza, but relative to the rest of the class, like he is 1-1 without a doubt. So I'm glad we see it similarly in that vein.
Yep, absolutely.
Man, dude, that's crazy. We did not talk about this before we recorded at all. And I'm very, very, very shocked at how similarly we saw the quarterback class and how our rankings are pretty similar. Were there any other quarterbacks that you watched that you were like, I don't know, like maybe he could be something? Or were there quarterbacks you watched, you were just like, I don't even think he's going to make it to the NFL?
I mean, the other guy that I did watch quite a bit of, and it's kind of a lackluster year, Drew Aller with Penn State.
Yes.
So he's a guy that kind of jumps out to me. Obviously kind of a similar situation to Garrett Nussmeier, not with the injuries, but just a very unstable situation, firing the coach midway through the year. Mm-hmm. Very talented roster, but things kind of just fell apart there. I still think there could be some upside there. Do I think that he's going to be a future star in the NFL? No, I really don't. But I do think that, like, worthy of a draft pick. I was very close to putting him on my honorable mentions. I see some things there that I like with Drew Aller. I think he's a pretty sharp quarterback. But that's probably the next closest. He's probably 8th on my list, but just not sure that his game's going to translate over quite as well.
So Drew Aller was one of mine as well that I watched quite a bit. Obviously coming into the season, he was also another guy that had a lot of potential upside. He was going to be potentially a high draft pick. But when I watch Drew Aller, I just think of somebody, I just think of a player like, there is so much mechanically that you have to try to correct with them coming into the NFL that I almost think it's borderline unfixable. Like, you watch a quarterback and quarterbacks play in rhythm. Like they just have like a feel for the game. They have like mechanics somewhat. Like when Drew Aller gets through his throwing motion, I look at it and I'm like, I just don't think that's going to work in the pros, or like, I think you're going to have to like substantially change the way you're throwing the football because there's a hitch. It's like, doesn't come off beautifully. Like he just doesn't look like a pure thrower of the football. And when you're playing quarterback, that's probably pretty important. So he's tough. I love the way he runs the football. I love the way he can run over somebody and stuff like that. So he definitely has that. He's got the body and the arm and all of that for the NFL, but he really, really struggles with his mechanics, and under pressure, his mechanics go way out of whack. So that is the fear, is the mechanics are so far gone that I don't know how you hone those in, especially because it doesn't seem like year over year he ever continued to improve that at all. It just either stayed the same, or to be honest, this senior year or this last year, it almost got a little bit worse. So that's why I had Drew Aller where I didn't have him ranked, but I did watch him. So I'm glad you pointed that out. But other than that, man, there weren't any other quarterbacks that I thought even were worthy of mentioning. I watched a little bit of Sawyer Robertson out of Baylor. I don't know if you caught any of him, 6'4", 220, but just bad mechanics. And one of my biggest turnoffs for a quarterback is when you throw off your back foot. Like the only player that I've seen get away with that is Jordan Love, and Sawyer Robertson does that so much. And he does that so much in college that I'm like, you don't even have a Love caliber arm to be able to afford to do that in the pro. So I don't know how you fix that, but that was the only other quarterback that I thought even warranted another an honorable mention, if you want to call it that. But that is all I had for quarterbacks. Jake, anything else you want to throw in there?
No, I think that's it.
Fernando Mendoza, and then the rest of the field is this year's quarterback class. Those are your 2026 quarterback prospects and how we rank them. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you're watching, hit the like, hit the subscribe. It helps spread the word. Instagram, Twitter, TikTok's where our socials are. I am Swikar. That is Jake. Next week, we are doing our top 10 running backs. We'll see you then.